I've had the opportunity to help thousands of people with severe plantar fasciitis. Honestly, I spend most of my time educating people on what not to do. Most of the recommendations people receive are for symptom relief and not long-term solutions for correction. In my opinion, the reason recovery rates are so poor with PF is because patients have been given misguided information and outdated tactics that are virtually ineffective. Orthotics, night splints, rolling your foot on a frozen water bottle, static calf stretches, cortisone shots, and super supportive shoes are some of the biggest mistakes people make with plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis is already so painful, the last thing you want to do is to make it worse. In this video, I will share the top 10 mistakes people make with plantar fasciitis and, of course, what to do about it. I'm Dr. Angela, and I'm the Plantar Fasciitis Doc, and I'm all about helping you resolve PF at home. Now, let's get into it. The first big mistake is wearing a foot orthotic. I know this is really confusing because this typically is one of the first recommendations you receive when you're diagnosed with PF. However, foot orthotics are one of the biggest roadblocks in healing PF. For years, orthotics have been the first line of defense and one of the most common treatment applications. But the newest research has shown that limiting movement and limiting our normal pronation robs our feet of normal function and leads to chronic PF. Using an external device like an orthotic is a temporary solution and doesn't address the underlying cause. The newest wave of understanding is putting your focus on improving the strength of your foot core. Until you correct the deficiency and weakness in your feet, you will continue to have reoccurring pain. The second big mistake is using the RICE method: rest, ice, compression, and elevation. This has been one of the most popular treatment methods for acute musculoskeletal injuries for years. Recently, this protocol has been proven to be ineffective for these types of injuries. In fact, in 2015, the founder of the RICE method retracted his statement and it went viral. He admitted he was wrong and was quoted, "It appears that both ice and complete rest may delay healing instead of helping," end of quote. This applies to plantar fasciitis as well. Most of you have been told to rest from all activities, roll your foot on a frozen water bottle and ice your foot, and compress and brace your foot and lower leg with boots or compression socks, and limit mobility with orthotics. And unfortunately, none of these methods help PF. Let me break this down for you, starting with rest. Many of you have tried complete rest for PF, and you probably already know this approach doesn't work. You may get temporary relief from your symptoms by taking time off of your favorite activity, whether that's running, walking, playing tennis, or pickleball. But when you return to the activity, the same problem arises. This reoccurring pain pattern is a classic presentation of plantar fasciitis. Rest will not resolve the pain. You must focus on correcting the underlying problem. I'll share more about that towards the end of the video. Now, there is a brief period where rest can be helpful and even necessary for healing. However, in most cases, starting a rehab and strengthening program quickly is the key. Does icing your foot help PF? Well, actually, no. Icing has been a standard protocol for treating injuries for as long as I can remember, but it doesn't work for PF, and here's why. This may surprise you, but if you've had PF for longer than 2 to 3 weeks, inflammation is not your problem. I explain this in greater detail in another one of my videos, but recent research has shown that in most cases of plantar fasciitis, that it is non-inflammatory and more of a structural breakdown of the soft tissues. Inflammation is found in very few cases. Ice only further restricts circulation and necessary movement and actually interrupts the healing process. It is not only useless in terms of helping recovery, but it is harmful to the recovery process. What about compression? Immobility is not an effective approach for treatment of plantar fasciitis. Compression socks, boots, and bracing all restrict movement and mobility and are detrimental to your recovery. Again, in the early phase of PF where your symptoms are more severe, you may find relief with these types of supports, but once you stop wearing them, you are back at square one with weakened muscles and limited mobility. We have also found no real evidence to support the benefit of elevation as a post-injury measure. These passive approaches change nothing about your condition. They only delay healing. They do not increase strength, improve soft tissue quality, or make your foot more resilient. The third mistake is wearing a night splint. Night splints are becoming increasingly popular as a treatment for PF. This prompted me to begin evaluating the effectiveness of wearing a night splint with my patients. Night splints have been shown to be helpful for some sufferers to diminish morning pain, yet there are a couple of problems with stretching the plantar fascia and surrounding musculature for such an extended period of time. The main reason is that prolonged or extended stretching, which is called static stretching, has been shown to have no significant effect on prevention long term. I'll explain more about the difference between active and static stretching in number 8, but briefly, wearing a night splint might reduce your morning heel pain, but it isn't lengthening the muscle like you think it is, and there are better approaches to increasing range of motion. The fourth mistake is getting a cortisone shot. One common mainstream approach to any muscle, joint, or fascial pain syndrome is a cortisone injection. They're given to help relieve pain and inflammation. They're basically an anti-inflammatory balm. Unfortunately, they are administered way too frequently, and they're just a short-term Band-Aid. And in the case of PF, we have already shared that there is likely no inflammation to diminish. There's no doubt that you can receive symptom relief. However, it can come with some considerable side effects. Number one, it's a short-term Band-Aid and it only masks symptoms and is not correcting the root cause. Sure, you may see some diminished pain relief, but nothing beyond that. The pain will return if the underlying cause is not addressed. Number two, tissue breakdown and weakness can occur. Injections can cause the tissues to begin to deteriorate, and this leads to further weakening and reoccurrence of the condition. So, in my opinion, the negative side effects outweigh the benefits. I completely understand why patients are seeking symptom relief because this condition can be so painful. There is a better, safer way to manage muscle, joint, and fascial conditions. The fifth mistake is considering plantar fasciitis surgery. Surgery can be seen as a quick fix for many PF sufferers to jump on the opportunity to potentially get out of pain. The problem is that the underlying cause of plantar fasciitis is biomechanical and involves more than just dysfunction in the plantar fascia. The most common surgery performed for PF is an endoscopic plantar fasciotomy. EPF. The purpose of the EPF is to release a tight or contracted plantar fascia and detach the fascia from the heel bone in order to relieve tension. It turns out that the plantar fascia is an incredibly important soft tissue structure. It provides arch stability and is a critical part of our gait sequence. Cutting the fascia may provide relief following the surgery. However, it can create further complications later. Also, having surgery is not a guarantee that your heel pain will go away. Most of the people who have surgery continue to have heel pain. In fact, recurrence of PF is seen in over 40% of cases. There is a much higher success rate with conservative, non-surgical measures for plantar fasciitis pain and should be considered prior to surgical intervention. The sixth mistake is wearing the wrong shoes. Many of you have been told to get thick, heavily cushioned, supportive shoes like Hoka's, Brooks, and New Balance. Unfortunately, all of these brands have damaging features that are keeping you from resolving your PF. I always dread sharing this with my patients because most of you have spent a ton of money on these expensive shoes and they can actually be contributing to your PF pain. Here's why. All of these brands have a narrow toe box and elevation of the heel. These features prevent your feet from functioning normally. When we walk and run, our feet and toes should naturally spread and splay. When we're cramming our toes into footwear that narrows at the toe, it hinders our normal toe splay and weakens our arch muscles over time. The intrinsic muscles of your foot core, will basically shut down and your foot will lose its ability to absorb shock. Also, elevation of the heel places excessive stress on our forefoot because of the downward angle, and it also causes chronic shortening of our heel cord, which is our calf muscle and Achilles tendon. So this is why so many people with PF have short, tight calf muscles. It's because of your shoes. Many of the common shoe brands that claim to be the answer to your PF are actually making it worse. The shoe industry is making millions off of people with PF. Shoes with excessive cushioning and built-in arch supports are contributing to the problem. Making footwear modifications is the first step in my PF home recovery guide. You must wear shoes that support the natural shape of your feet. If you are new to my program, I typically recommend a transitional shoe first before you make a full shift to a barefoot or minimalist shoe. A transitional shoe is a shoe that has all the characteristics of a barefoot shoe, such as zero drop and a wide toe box, but has a thicker stack height or more cushioning for support and comfort. Transitional shoes were designed to create a smoother transition to a minimalist shoe. The transitional brands that I recommend are Ultras, Flux Footwear, or Topo Athletic. Each of these brands meet the criteria for healthy footwear and are a good first introduction to the new concept of better foot function. I have an approved shoe list with the footwear that I approve and recommend for PF. Put the word shoes in the comments and I will make sure you get a copy of that. The seventh big mistake is never walking barefoot. Have you been told to never walk barefoot if you have plantar fasciitis or any other type of foot condition? Barefoot walking is actually one of the healthiest things you can do for your feet, but sadly, most of you have been told to avoid any barefoot contact with the ground and wear shoes from the moment you awaken until you take your last step in the evening. Barefoot walking naturally strengthens your foot core, and without a strong foot core, you will not resolve your PF. Adding toe spacers while walking barefoot further amplifies the corrective benefits. Toe spacers are a tool that promotes healthy toe splay by separating the toes and helping to restore the natural position and function of the toes. I prescribe toe spacers to all my patients with plantar fasciitis, bunions, hammer toes, neuromas, and even Achilles tendinopathies. The eighth mistake is practicing static stretching versus active stretching. Most people who suffer with PF have researched the best remedies to resolve your pain. Stretching is always at the top of the list. It seems reasonable as your arch, calf, and Achilles tendon areas just feel tight. Yet stretching is not as simple an undertaking as it seems. One common mistake many people make is doing the wrong type of stretch. There are multiple styles of stretching that target different goals, and certain types of stretching can actually make your problem worse. When most people hear the word stretch, they think about holding a stretching position for a prolonged period of time, like 20 to 30 seconds. This is called static stretching, but using static stretching is not the most effective way to achieve flexibility gains. The stretching debate is a hot topic in the rehab world. I have spent countless hours researching this one because stretching and improving flexibility is such an important part of your PF rehab strategy. The evidence is comprehensively in favor of active or dynamic stretching as being far superior to static stretching for PF rehabilitation. And the reason is because the most effective treatments for PF resemble treatments for tendinopathies. Tendons speak in the language of load and mobility, meaning progressive strengthening and loading the soft tissues is a more effective approach than static stretching. There is also no published evidence to support static stretching as a useful intervention. Active or dynamic stretching involves movement and motion and is only held for 2 seconds versus 30 seconds. Active stretching feels more like repetitions than stretching because you only hold the stretch for 2 seconds, yet it is incredibly effective for improving range of motion and mobility. The 9th mistake is failing to address scar tissue and adhesions in the soft tissues. If you have PF, there is no doubt that you have accumulated scar tissue and adhesions. Scar tissue forms as a result of repetitive stress. It is also referred to as fascial adhesions or fascial restrictions. Think of scar tissue as the body's duct tape. For example, in the case of PF, if you walk too far in bad shoes, or if you're a runner and you increase your mileage too fast, you overwhelm the structural integrity of the plantar fascia and create small injuries known as microtraumas. The body will lay down a quick patch to aid in healing these small injuries, and that is known as scar tissue formation. Unfortunately, over time, the scar tissue will build up and accumulate, and they start to affect normal function of the muscles and fascia. In fact, they will often lead to pain, tightness, lack of flexibility, and muscle weakness. One of the most effective ways to remove scar tissue and adhesions is with instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization. I have used this technique in my practice for many years with great success. It involves the use of a stainless steel instrument to scrape away fascial adhesions. These tools greatly assist in improving soft tissue quality and improving blood flow to the affected area, and in turn create healing. I recommend performing muscle scraping every 2 days on the calf muscles, the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the Achilles tendon, and the plantar fascia. I have a full video on how to use this technique effectively. Be sure you take a look at that one. The 10th and final mistake is expecting a quick fix for recovery. Rarely is there a quick fix for PF. Most cases have taken years to develop and will not resolve overnight. Also, many PF sufferers only address the initial phase of the condition with symptom relief and fail to address the underlying cause with proper rehabilitation. Throughout the course of this video, you have heard me mention how important it is to address the underlying cause to get real correction. In my program, I address each of these components. Now let me summarize what we have covered here and the solutions. The first step in my program is to transition to footwear that is widest at the toe and has no elevation of the heel, 0 drop. The next step is to focus on correcting the weakness and deficiencies in your foot and lower leg by improving strength and mobility. The next step is to remove fascial adhesions that lead to loss of movement, increased pain, and limited circulation. And the last step is to slowly introduce your feet to barefoot walking with toe spacers. Each of these steps are included in my free guide to resolve PF at home. Put the word guide in the comments and I will make sure you get a copy of that. Be sure you watch my next video on more strategies to resolve your PF.